Hi guys, welcome back. Hopefully you've found this section on language analysis helpful and you've been using your time to master the skill of identifying techniques and writing about how and why the author used them to persuade the audience. Make sure you've also looked at the sample plans for those 5 articles that we gave you in the last episode. Compare them to the answers that you did and see where you could have improved. This section of the series is dedicated to other skills you'll need for English. We're going to begin by talking about preparing for oral presentations, and then, depending on your state, we've provided guidance on creative writing and context. For now, let's get into looking at oral presentations. So you have that inevitable English speech coming up. Afraid? Everybody is. In fact, studies have shown that public speaking is the most common fear in the world. In fact, it's feared on average more than death. When I prepared for oral presentations, I encountered 2 major hurdles. 1, how to write a speech, and more importantly, how to cope with the nerves that arrive in the days and minutes just before delivering it. So this episode is going to focus on what you need to write up your speech and calm those inevitable butterflies. As we all know, reading an essay aloud is not a speech. Therefore, the style and expression of your speech will need to be different from an essay. The good news is that the planning stages of your presentation will be very similar to the planning stages of an essay, and the stylistic elements that make a difference will come later. So let's say you've got a speech to present. How do you stylize a written piece that you've created so that it becomes like a speech? I want to give you 4 tips for stylizing your speech. Number 1 is be memorable. As a start, you want to grab the attention of the audience. And unlike an essay, you have a lot of scope to do this. A really good way to do it is to begin with a story. Why a story? Stories engage audiences because they're an evolutionary tendency. It's how information has been passed on from generation to generation for thousands of years. Also, we remember stories because they deliver information in a way where we attach meaning to what is being said in a visual sense. Another great way to be memorable is to take a well-known phrase or idea and invert it, turn it completely on its head. For example, one of the best-known speeches by the famous US President, John F. Kennedy, had the line, "So my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what can you do for your country." These sorts of lines have power. I'm going to link you to a really good speech by Ashton Kutcher. That's right, the actor. See if you can find the part in the speech where he turns a popular idea completely on its head, and how valuable that is to the message that he's trying to get across. The second tip for stylizing your speech is going to be the use of structure. A great structure involves signposting. Many great speeches contain the rule of 3, saying, "Today I want to tell you about 3 things." And in this way, each time the speaker starts a new idea, they can say, "Now the second thing I want to talk about is this." This creates a sense of structure in the listener's mind and allows them to digest the speech more easily. It's also a great way to get people's attention because you're giving them a mental break when you say, "Now for my second point," or however you choose to phrase it. A great reference for this is the Steve Jobs address at Stanford. Again, I've posted the link below. I strongly encourage you to take a look at the way he signposts his points. Tip 3 is going to be use appropriate language. It's particularly important in a speech to avoid overcomplicated words or jargon. When writing your oral, simply ask, "What am I really trying to say?" and the right words will come to you far more easily. Many people make the mistake of trying to sound smart and they end up clouding the real meaning of their speech through sophisticated language that doesn't really make sense. Of course, this leads to not being able to get any marks. I found a great way to test this is to read it to a younger sibling. If they can't understand at least the main ideas, you haven't been clear enough. There are, of course, exceptions to this rule, and it definitely depends on the nature of your speech and the angle that you want to take in presenting it. Tip 4 is be engaging. I can't stress this point enough. Don't be boring and don't feel bored by the material that you're presenting. Of course, a speech for a class can't be the most exciting thing you've ever heard, but you can always try and make it sound good, and here's where creativity comes in. When you make a point, try to express it using examples and stories that will raise an eyebrow or have an impact. Ask the audience rhetorical questions, look them in the eye, and alter your tone and intensity. Once again, a test for how engaging you are is really simple. Say it out loud to yourself or to a parent or to a sibling. If they're bored, it's likely the class or examiner will be bored too. Even more importantly, if you're bored, you can guarantee others will be. Now, I want to briefly touch on the nerves and how to stay calm, because I think that's probably the biggest challenge students face in a speech. There's 3 quite simple ways to minimize this issue. First, know your content back to front. One of our biggest fears is screwing up in front of the class, and we often spend most of our time focusing on getting it right instead of making an impact and speaking with confidence. Quite simply, know your material so well that you don't need any notes to read from. Anyone who performs well has practiced a lot. Rehearse your speech in front of yourself in the mirror and in front of audiences such as family and friends. As soon as you've said it to a few people and received approval and feedback, your nerves will start to melt away. Secondly, often the scariest part of speaking and the nerves is not the actual process of talking, but the mental image or scenario that we create for ourselves in the lead up. We imagine the worst case thing happening, but it rarely ever does, and this scares us into paralysis. Quite simply, look at the facts. Remember that every other student is in the same position as you, and they don't care about your speech as much as you do. Also, when you put yourself in their shoes, you realize that they're merely trying to listen to what you're saying. They can't tell that you have sweaty palms or that your voice is trembling. Only you can. The second that you no longer attach emotion to what the audience will think about you, you begin to focus on the facts, that you're there to present some ideas and do your best to engage that audience. Finally, just do some deep breaths before you stand up to speak. Simply taking 5 deep breaths as slowly as possible will slow everything down, give you some extra oxygen delivery to your blood, and let you be focused on something other than the speech. As I mentioned, a good test at any stage of the process is to put your words into action and rehearse in front of family and friends. Their feedback will often be effective and will help you develop a speech that everyone is going to love. Your action for this video is to watch the Ashton Kutcher speech and the Steve Jobs speech that I've linked below. They're very, very different people, so I want you to try and pick the similarities in the style that they use and how that they present. There's much more than you'd think at face value. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next episode.